As you likely expect with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, we have a group of Ghostbusters taking on a variety of different ghosts, but in the real world, we have the audience taking on the critics. And that's because we have quite the split when it comes to different reactions, with the current Rotten Tomatoes score for the audience being 85% compared to the 44% for the critics. When we look at Ghostbusters as a franchise, it is a bit more laid back compared to others. It wants to have its fun and get the audience involved with that. And for this new film, Frozen Empire, it's clear that people are still finding that enjoyment with these new ghosts and with the chaos that unfolds. However, on the flip side, that chaos can be looked at as a mess, and as I was expecting and many of us were, this is another nostalgia bait film, and after what we had with Ghostbusters Afterlife, is that just one step too many? Now in terms of Ghostbusters Afterlife, that film is quite special for me because that was the first film I reacted to on this channel, and I'm just going to play the last bit of that short because it is quite relevant to what I want to say next. Overall, I feel like it's a solid Sunday afternoon type film with your family and for the kids, but for Ghostbusters fans, I think they'll enjoy the callbacks, but not enough here for you to really get your teeth into. Now as I said back then, I think people did enjoy the callbacks in Afterlife because it was that film which came after Ghostbusters 2016, which did not go down very well. And with that film, it's one where we're having the old generation and the new generation crossing over and having a bit like that Force Awakens style film for Ghostbusters. But with these sort of bridge films to be looked back on as successful, you have to then deliver in the following movie with your trust behind the new generation. But here we have yet more nostalgia going on, and it's like, you know, how many more? It's like another thing, another reference. Like, come on.
Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this.
Another thing I said in my Ghostbusters Afterlife reaction was there wasn't enough there for fans to get their teeth sunk into. Well, here there is plenty. There's way too much. We have too many characters, too many side plots, just too much. And with the film trying to balance all these different elements, it meant that the first 2/3 of the film really just became a bit of a slog. It wasn't until that final third where it really started to focus up, and it's like, oh, we're finally getting to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire now, great. Because it came so late in the day where I even thought, is this going to be split into a part 1 and a part 2, and I didn't even know about it? To throw a positive in here, when the evil force does eventually get unleashed in this film, I did quite like the design of it, and also the sort of background behind the character as well. And for the majority of the ghosts, they were what I was expecting, but there were a few little surprises here and there. But for the little mini puff marshmallow men, they got a bit on my nerves because they sort of just appeared here and there as that cutesy character, and there just to sort of be like, oh, here's the merch, buy the merch sort of thing. One of the biggest disappointments from this film was the comedy, because hardly anything landed, and it's pretty much crickets in my screening, apart from one guy who just seemed to laugh at absolutely everything.
Will you shut up? You shut up, man. It's a comedy.
As it was in Afterlife, the main character here is Phoebe, but this time around her story is definitely not as inspiring and doesn't carry the film as well. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that she's not really with podcasts as much this time. And with podcasts, he is in the film, but now he's a bit older, he has lost a bit of that charm, and the film isn't really able to bring that back. And I do feel sorry for people like Paul Rudd and Finn Wolfhard, because they are in the movie, but they have really small roles, especially for Paul Rudd. You know, he's the front of the poster. You'd have thought he would have a bigger role, but not really. Dan Aykroyd, though, does get to play a bigger part, and he contributes to one of the better scenes in the film, which takes place outside of a library. Ernie Hudson and Bill Murray make up the numbers, and instead it's newcomers like James Acaster and Kumail Nanjiani who take on bigger roles. On the latter's character, he did feel quite out of place at times, but I do respect that he did try to inject some energy into the film. And on James Acaster, his character Lars Pinfield didn't really make much of an impression, and it was a weird casting really, because James Acaster, he's a well-known comedian from the UK who has a very particular style when it comes to comedy, and he was never going to be able to translate that really into this role, so why even bother having him here? So referring back to my original point, I have to side with the critics, because this film is a complete disaster when you look at the potential it had. Like, there is something in here, but there's just so much fat that needs to be trimmed. It's just clogged down, and it really feels like they're just rinsing as much as they can do from this brand and not giving this franchise a fresh impetus. We'll have to wait and see how the film performs in regards to the box office. It does have a budget of $100 million, but of course next week we do have the release of Godzilla x Kong, and I think it's going to face a tough battle up against those two heavyweights. This is most certainly not the last we'll see of Ghostbusters though, and so where do you think they should take the franchise moving forward? I think they'll probably change the setting and take us to the beach and take us to the sea. Maybe have some sea ghosts involved with a shipwreck, have an ecto boat, all that sort of thing, because of course, merch is king. But of course, let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below, and if you want to watch another video on screen is my review for Damsel.